So welcome back everybody. In today's video, we're going to answer which is best for you, a disc or a tiller on your compact tractor. So I recently just got my hands on a brand new 5-foot PTO tiller from a company named Solus. They're the ones that, well, we run their tractors on the channel right here. And then I've got an older rented heavy built 5-foot disc right here. So if you're in the market for a new tractor, you're probably trying to decide, do I go with a tiller? Do I go with a disc? Because chances are you're not looking to purchase both because they do similar jobs, although they both do them differently. So that's what we're going to try to answer in today's video. Which is right for you? They both have pros and cons. So let's dive right into it. So by far I have the most experience with a set of discs. I own a much larger 6-foot disc for our larger tractor, and then like I said, I have been renting this one for our smaller tractor until I can get a brand new set in from Solus. And let me go ahead and tell you, all discs are not created equal. It ultimately depends on the size and horsepower of your tractor, and weight of a tractor is very important. Moving inertia, momentum, that forward momentum, the heavier the tractor, typically the heavier the ground engaging equipment that you can pull. The larger the size disc, the heavier built the frame, and the more weight that you have in a set of discs, the more likely it is to sink into the ground and turn the ground over. Those light angle iron frame discs that you see, not all are created the same. Some work okay, some don't work well at all because they're so light. Now you can wind up getting a disc that's too big for your tractor. I was actually shocked that this 24 horsepower tractor can pull this very heavy built 5-foot disc right here. Typically tractors in that horsepower range you'll see pull a lot of 4-foot implements and light implements at that, but it actually pulls this well. We tested that in another video. So if you're new to disc, here's the way they work. They have these dome shaped cutting discs down there. They can either be smoothed or notched right here, but because they're domed and cupped, as soon as you put any angle to them, instead of them riding straight in the line on the dirt, as soon as you put any angle, well, they cup and flip the dirt up and around. And you'll do them two opposite directions. You'll notice the front is set up exact opposite of the rear. So the front is digging aggressively, throwing one direction. The rear is busting up those clumps and throwing it back the exact opposite direction, trying to smooth out as best you can. You'll see a lot of discs are adjustable. Some are not, but a lot of them are. So you can actually change the angle of these discs. The more that you turn in, the more aggressive they are, the more cupping and scooping action they have to the ground. Now, a big benefit, let's talk pros and cons of each piece of equipment. The big benefit to this is, well, you've got a decent amount of adjustment here, but you can run really fast with a set of discs, covering ground many times faster than a tiller, which requires you to work very slow. Now, because of that cupping action, the way these discs sink down into the ground, they tend to not leave the ground as level as a tiller. But you can actually pull stuff behind your set of discs to smooth the ground out. So there's lots of different variables to what we're going to discuss today. But to start with, on breaking new ground, you can set your disc nice and aggressive as we just explained, and then you can make a second pass over, less aggressive, maybe a third pass or more if needed. Another pro to a set of discs, often they cost less than a tiller. There's just less moving parts here. This is gear driven. You have lots of tines over here, moving parts, bearings. This is pretty simplistic overall and cheaper to manufacture. So as we're looking across right here, one big negative to a set of discs is, well, the overall heft, the size, the weight, and storage. Look how much room it takes up here. And it requires a decent sized tractor to pull this, although it does require a decent amount of PTO horsepower to turn a tiller. But if you're worried about compact size, spinning around the end of the row, storage underneath your barn, the tiller's gonna win any day of the week. It's just gonna be smaller than this right here overall. If you're not familiar with a PTO tiller, it has a shaft that comes off the PTO of the tractor, goes to a gearbox, runs through another shaft, and it runs a gear set on the side of this one. You can see belt driven, gear driven, they have all different styles, but there are gears and an oil bath on the side there that ultimately comes underneath and runs a set of tines that we'll just say are essentially on a drum. Hopefully the camera's picking that up. You can adjust your depth by the bolt holes here, where the skids and shoes run either lower or higher. As far as adjusting the depth on the set of discs right here, you have to do that by raising and lowering the 3-point arms on the tractor, which you kind of do that, a little bit of that with the tiller as well. Now this back spring-loaded gate on the tiller actually goes ahead and smooths the ground out for you. That is one huge positive to a tiller. You run much slower here, but you typically wind up with a 1-pass implement, and it leaves the ground nice and smooth. We're going to test this today. Whereas with a set of discs, unless you're dragging something behind it, making it more cumbersome, harder to pull, and bigger, well, you wind up with a lot rougher ground with a set of discs. So let's keep all this in mind. Assuming you've sized your equipment properly to your tractor, that's very important. Typically your disc is going to run much faster, but normally you're doing multiple passes with a set of discs to get good broken ground. The tiller is going to be a lot slower, but often you'll do one pass and you wind up with pulverized, perfectly smooth ground that's ready to plant. Now, because this is so much slower, is the disc still faster? Probably so. We're going to test that day. You're going to see the speeds that I can run with both. But for the person that is looking for kind of a do-all implement, I want to go plant a food plot, I want to bust ground for a garden every year, the tiller is very hard to beat. It's hard to go pulverize, say, a garden and fresh ground there with a set of discs compared to a tiller. So if you're doing gardening, for example, tiller's probably going to win hands down. If you're doing really large food plots like the one here behind me that we're going to be covering in the next episode, the disc is probably going to win because you can cover ground quicker. And we're not looking for as smooth of ground out here as you're going to get with the tiller. Something else to really keep in mind, are you running a four-wheel drive tractor or two-wheel drive tractor? I often run four-wheel drive for a heavy ground engaging implement. Otherwise, I find that you can tend to spin down, especially with lighter weight compact tractors. Whereas that is not necessarily the case with a tiller. Now, I've got limited experience with a tiller, but it seems like you can run it much slower. You're not needing as aggressive tires, weight of the tractor, that four-wheel drive to pull it. So that can make a big difference as well. Next, maintenance. A disc is probably going to win there. Most have sealed bearings and you just don't do nothing to them other than clean them off after you get them out of the field. Tiller, all you're really doing here is keeping an eye on your oil and your different gearboxes, and some of them will have some grease points as well. Overall, very minor maintenance to a tiller. If you're talking thick brush, which you should be mowing down and getting all the matter out of the way before you start breaking ground, a tiller's typically going to wrap up in that stuff, whereas a disc oftentimes will cut some of that, although it's probably not going to bust it up well. So if you're constantly working in thick root matter, vines, thick material, tiller's probably not the right choice. But I highly recommend you go mow and take care of your ground before using either implement, so that really shouldn't be factored in. All right, so let's break some ground. I need to get this large food plot planted behind me. We're gonna make a few passes with the disc so you can see how quick you work there, the way it leaves the ground. We'll make a few passes with the tiller so you can see the speed of it, and again, how it's left the ground there, because they're gonna look completely different, trust me. And maybe this will answer the question of what you're looking for. I also want you to know that I'm running a very large tiller on a very low horsepower tractor. And that's because this tractor has a very wide stance, which I really like. Small compact tractors are known for instability. So the wider you make these tires, like Solus has right here, the more stable this tractor is. But in order to cover your tracks, which I like doing whenever I'm busting ground, you got to go up to a next size tiller. A 4-foot would probably be the perfect tiller on this, but we're running a 5. We're also going to be running bigger tractors down the road, so it makes sense for me to have a 5-footer here right now as well. So I'm probably going to be running slightly slower than you would if I had a 4-footer on here. But keep in mind, you want to run slow with the tiller anyways, because we're trying to pulverize, smooth the ground, and take care of everything in one pass. So let's see the speed differences and how the ground is left between the two. Let's get started. So first of all, it is way too windy to be out here doing this today. I got my camera and the tractor covered right there. We just had a cold front come through and it's definitely windy. So if we take a look, nice and smooth like I expect, And I was actually going quicker than I was thinking I was going to be able to go. And I even ran it through this area down here, which has some very thick material. Honestly, this should be mowed before I till in. Give you an idea how thick all this is. I don't recommend disking or tilling and stuff that thick, but it was a good test. You can see we could almost do another pass there, but really, mow this down, then till it and you'll be good. Now let's go down here and take a look to where it got back thin again. This looks beautiful. Other than just a little small edge where it was kind of throwing some dirt out the side, that looks amazing. Literally one pass, you're good to go with a tiller, at least for a food plot and something like this. All right, so now let's hook up to the disc. We're gonna run through some thick stuff like I just did with the tiller. Then we're gonna run through some very thin stuff. Let's look at the speed and see how everything looks after we're done. So low range, 4-wheel drive, full RPMs. Let's see the speed that we can get up to before we start pulling the tractor itself down, and then we'll back off and we'll compare that speed to the tiller. Okay, so we definitely got some results, didn't we? The disc nowhere near as good as the tiller, and I think that was to be expected. Let's go down here into thick stuff. So I don't know if y'all can tell, it's going downhill a lot here. The camera just doesn't do it justice with a wide angle lens. Going downhill, I could run and pull that disc wide open as far down as I could push the pedal on the tractor. Coming back uphill, because, well, the tractor's now having to pull itself up a hill, I could only go maybe twice as fast as I was going with the tiller. So let's just say on level ground, you can probably run about 3 times as fast with a disc as you can a tiller. Rough estimate. Now, if we come out here and look at this, does not look good. As soon as we get into thick stuff, this is the problems you have with a compact tractor and compact disc. They're just not heavy enough to really sink into the stuff. Plus, it's kind of dry as well. It takes an extremely heavy disc to get down into matted up material, green material, bust through the roots and turn it all over. So really thick stuff compared to tiller, tiller wins hands down. So if we come down here to where it was just a lot looser material, tiller did an excellent job. Practically nothing sticking up, and the disc did quite well itself. This is still not ready to plant. There's a lot of grass still sticking up. I think 2 passes in this circumstance, the disc has it ready to do some rough planting. It won't be perfectly smooth, not like this, but the tiller thus far, 1 pass in just about anything, it's ready to go. All right, so let's leave the camera rolling and see how many passes it takes to get this presentable. My guess is I'm gonna have to do 3 to 4 passes to get all this to where I would consider planting. That'll tell us something. Is the tiller really twice as slow or 3 times as slow, or is it exactly the same, or potentially even faster? All right, I'm calling it quits. That is 4 passes, my friend, which is a ridiculous amount of passes when you really think about it. I am pleased with everything except where that thick grass was. Let's take a look at it. Although it's getting it there. So if we take a look where this grass is, a lot of that's chopped up and gonna die. And yes, you could plant in this, but again, 4 passes, 1 pass. So if we look down further past where it was somewhat clear, 2 passes with the disc had the ground where I thought was very good. All right, so let's wrap this test up. Hopefully y'all can hear me. It is so windy. So I've always been under the assumption that the tiller is by far the slower implement. Today's test proved that wrong. Now, I don't have all circumstances for today. We're dealing with very dry ground, and typically a disc does very good in moist soil, but we don't always get that, do we? So my gut says they're probably evenly matched. I know in this particular field, if I'm not cutting thick grass in and I got it mowed or sprayed, typically 2 passes with a good set of discs, and I can be ready to plant. Now it's still gonna have ruts, furrows, and be uneven. It's not gonna be as smooth as a tiller. That's something to keep in mind. And I can say 2 passes is about the same speed as 1 pass with a tiller. At least it appears to be the case with the particular setup that I have. Yours is gonna vary based on the tiller you have, the horsepower of your tractor, all these other different variables. Now I can say if your ground is hard packed, dry, got a little bit of thick material in it, the circumstances just are not ideal, the tiller actually seems to be the winner. I kind of still always thought the disc would be the quicker source here. So it ultimately boils down to what you're wanting to spend, the maintenance, the storage, amount of room the stuff takes up, and what your ultimate goals are. If you're trying to get perfectly smooth ground, or you're constantly want to bust up, say, a garden space, I think the tiller is going to be the smart choice. If you're just wanting to come out and rough chop in some stuff out in the field, a cattle field, or do some food plots for hunting, things such as that, the disc is probably going to win. And another area that I can think of, especially when it comes to food plots, where the disc may be a better option than, say, a tiller, if you've got a lot of roots, material on the ground, or rocks, you're probably going to have less damage to a disc than you are a tiller. So that's some other stuff to factor in as well. Fortunately for us down here, majority of our food plots, we've gotten areas to where we're not fighting roots and there's just no rocks in Florida. We're blessed with good sand. All right, this was a fun little test. Hopefully this answered some of your questions. They both do the job. One's just gonna do it differently than the other. I think we've kind of squashed my thinking of the tiller is unbelievably slow. Yeah, it feels that way, but 1 pass looks beautiful. Multiple passes with a disc. It's just whichever one fits your preference there. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next video.